Hey guys, I haven't done an EV update in a while actually, and I think it's time to do another one, particularly because there's a couple of things that have just happened that basically spurred me on to go, yeah, I think it's time we talked about EVs and how they're doing. Now, first of all, I saw the other day that it's being reported that one of the members of the board at BMW I don't know if this is a direct quote or if it's a paraphrasing, but apparently they've said ICE and combustion will never disappear. Never. So that's like a solid endorsement of the internal combustion engine there. But that was one thing, and that can be dismissed as, okay, well, that's just a quote from somebody on the board that, is kind of leaning in that direction. But if you remember, not very long ago, in fact, literally a few days ago, I did an ode to the Porsche 718 Boxster Cayman series. And I talked about, the first time I drove one, the fact that I've driven so many of them, and, how important they were, what they meant. And I did all of that because Porsche said that that was the last one, that they were killing it. After 9 years of the production run of the current car, they were going to kill it off, primarily because of cybersecurity purposes. It was too expensive to update the software. So they were just going to kill it off because they had a new car in the pipeline anyway. And the new car in the pipeline, we got a kind of preview of it, again, very recently, not as a Porsche, but actually as an Audi. So the Audi Concept C, which was shown recently, basically will be the car that will share the platform with the new generation of Boxster Cayman. Both those cars have an EV dedicated architecture, but interestingly, they're making them mid-engine in a sense, in that they were going to put the battery behind the driver and passenger. So they were going to put the weight there to try and get the rest of the car a bit lower, because again, when you sandwich batteries in the floor, then the floor lifts a little bit, the cars end up a little bit taller. So I guess that's how they were going to get around that. I don't know how they were going to distribute the weight to get a nice 50-50 balance, etc., but that was the plan. So having said that, and the fact that they showed the Audi Concept C, they announced the death of the Boxster Cayman, they said that the next car was going to be electric, and then, plot twist, Porsche apparently has just confirmed that there will be internal combustion engine versions of the next generation Boxster Cayman. So maybe I was a bit, talks of the death of the Boxster Cayman internal combustion engine models was perhaps a little premature on my part. Was it? Was it not? Well, according to these reports, it was, because they are going to be considering introducing internal combustion engine versions of those cars, although they will be for the top trim. So they will be like the most premium and most expensive versions will still come with a petrol engine. But this is not the only barometer of what's happening with the EV market. So let's get into more of what Porsche said and what others are doing and what's happening in general. And let's do that right after this.
A brown car guy.
Right, so let's unpack that a little bit, because it's not just me saying that. The reports are apparently in Motor One and Autocar, the Talk Report, Car Buzz. Lots of people are reporting that Porsche has confirmed that the next generation 718 Boxster and Cayman series will continue to offer petrol power. This is after they clearly said, they absolutely said, this is it. We're not going to be doing any more of these. There will only be EVs from now on. Here's an Audi Concept that is EV. Here's the architecture. Here's the platform that it is EV. It's going to mimic mid-engine, but it's going to be EV. But then all of a sudden they're like, nope, we will have internal combustion engine versions. But there will be the top end versions. So there'll be like the GT version, the RS version, etc., etc. So the regular, whatever they're going to be, will probably still be EVs. In addition to that, Porsche apparently will also continue to offer ICE and plug-in electric hybrid versions of Cayenne and Panamera going forward. They were talking about another SUV that was going to come in from Porsche that was going to maybe sit above the Cayenne. That was likely to have been an all EV, but now they're talking about, in addition to EV, there will also be an internal combustion and a plug-in hybrid for that one as well. Why? Porsche says there's been a clear drop in demand for exclusive battery electric cars, and they need to respond to market realities. And I did say this recently in some other video or something where we were talking about, supercars and super sports cars and stuff that's on the more expensive levels, and a lot of supercar makers are now finding that they're having to backpedal and cut back their plans for EV only versions because their clientele, which, let's be honest, are either the super rich or at least the reasonably well off. And they're like, well, we don't really care for EVs. We'd like to have a car that we can pour petrol in, and no matter how expensive it gets, we can afford to pour it in. So it doesn't really matter to us, We don't want the inconvenience of having to stop, or rather, to have our man stop and charge the cars for us, So this is what these premium companies are finding, is that, it's not really worth it for them to go down that route. So Porsche is hedging. They're hedging their bets. They are still actually investing in EV, but they're saying that ICE and hybrids are not over yet. And don't forget, Porsche also have been looking extensively and have been investing extensively in alternative fuel technology as well. Alternative fuel, by that I mean like e-fuels, biofuels, that sort of stuff. So they are looking at, continuing the internal combustion engine in some form or another for a while yet. The timeline for ICE is well, basically what they're saying is that ICE is not going away quietly, not yet anyway. They're not alone. We'll come back to that in terms of Europe, but over in Japan, Toyota, of course, have been very reluctant to jump onto the EV bandwagon. They are on it now, but they've been slow to the party and not entirely with 100% enthusiasm, it seems, particularly when you have the boss of Toyota, or the ex-boss, and I think he's still like consultant or chief advisor or something, but he's Akio Toyoda, which, to be honest, I'm a fan because he always seems to understand car people. He understands what car enthusiasm. He is an enthusiast. He's a part-time racer. He's raced in the Nürburgring and stuff like that. So he's a proper petrol head himself. And he said that Toyota has sold 27 million hybrids since the Prius launched. And those hybrids have roughly the same carbon footprint as if Toyota had built 9 million battery electric vehicles. Once you factor in production, battery emissions, and electricity mix, where they get the electricity from. So by that, what you mean, I know this sounds a bit mind-blowing, but basically what he's saying is that if we had made 9 million battery electric vehicles, that was only 9 million cars that we produced, but for the same level of emissions, we could actually put nearly 3 times as many cars into the market at 27 million cars. So that's what they've actually done. So this is where, and you're saying, well, how does that work out? And I think particularly in Japan, this is quite important or quite relevant, because Japan's electricity still comes from thermal power plants. So until they change the infrastructure there, they're not really getting the benefit of clean electricity or clean energy to actually charge those vehicles. So in that sense, Toyota is like, well, what's the point of us making electric vehicles when the power that's coming to charge them is still not emissions free? And he has a point. Does that apply to the rest of the world? Well, in some cases, in some parts of the world, yeah, it certainly would do. But in other parts of the world, maybe less so. But overall, it is an interesting argument. It is an interesting way to look at it. 1 EV equals 3 hybrids, effectively. That's what he's saying. Toyota has used this to defend Toyota's multipathway approach. By multipathway means they're not just going down one approach, they're looking at hybrids, they're looking at fuel cells. They do, because Toyota obviously sells the Mirai, which is a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. They're looking at mild EVs, they're looking at hybrids, they're looking at an internal combustion engine, but also they're looking at hydrogen-powered internal combustion engines. So that's the other thing that they're doing. So, and many of the other Japanese manufacturers are similarly doing that. With Porsche, of course, owned by the Volkswagen Group themselves, cutting EV margins a little bit. They're looking back at it a little bit. Obviously, they're going to be hit by Porsche's decision to delay the arrival of the, one assumes, the Boxster Cayman, because now to redevelop, because this is the other thing that bugs me, is like, okay, I understand that they've created a platform where the batteries are placed in the middle of the engine, but a dedicated EV platform is very different to an internal combustion engine platform. Now you can, of course, take an internal combustion engine platform and then convert it to run electric, because you can put batteries in various places and stuff. So you can go this direction. So you can go ICE available and also EV, because you put the batteries into the ICE or into the internal combustion engine platform. But I feel it's much harder to go the other way, where you have a car that is a dedicated electric vehicle architecture, and then you're trying to put in a combustion engine into that. I find so there's going to be a cost. Some people are talking as much as 6 billion euros it's going to cost them, and that's going to hit the bottom line for Volkswagen, of course, because that's the company that owns Porsche. I'm getting into BMW because I'm going to look at them next, because BMW has obviously said that internal combustion engine will always be around. ICE never disappears. And they are also looking at multi-energy architectures. Mercedes are pretty much doing the same thing. And this again might be a little bit of a surprise, because BMW has actually been quite successful in the EV market with its I range of cars. And certainly one of my favorite EVs is the i4 M50. I thought it was fantastic. And if I had to have an EV, that probably would be the one, if I could ever afford something like that, because they are expensive. But they have done well. I mean, they've been selling a good segment of their market, has been BMWs in European markets for the EV sector. So they've actually done well out of it. And yet even they're like, yeah, well, we're not sure about this. The issues are customer behavior and regulatory drag. Consumers aren't always rushing to EVs if the price is high, infrastructure is spotty, running costs are unpredictable. Governments are pushing and pulling EV policy deadlines, so they keep chopping and changing. Like we had 2030, then we had 2035, then we have 2030 again. It's all very confusing. There are grants, there are tax breaks, or there aren't. So this is all a little bit of a problem. And car makers are basically doing what you'd expect them to do in a volatile environment. They're not going full steam ahead with stuff that they're not sure about or they don't really understand, but they're going, okay, well, let's double down on the stuff that we do understand and we do know that the market wants, which is kind of logical, really. But at the same time, as I said earlier, hedging their bets because they're not pulling back investment or development R&D in EVs. And hey guys, while I've got your attention, make sure that you hit like, share and subscribe and support independent journalism channels like mine. You can do that at patreon.com, coffee.com, and of course right here on YouTube you can take out a voluntary paid subscription, or you can buy my books. I've got 3 books out at the moment: a full action thriller, The ULEZ Files, a collection of short stories, The Quantum Races, and How to Do What I Do, How to Be an Automotive Content Creator. All of those books are on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. If you buy any of those books, I'll be grateful, but if you buy all 3, I'll enter you into a prize draw to win this keyring and badge. This is an exclusive set. There's only 20 of these. 2 of them have already gone out, so there's still 18 left of these to be won if you buy all 3 of these books and send me proof that you have them. Now back to the video. And also this has got a lot to do with governments and what's happening in countries. So we know that, for example, in the US, Trump is not a fan of EVs, and they have pulled back all the incentives and all the rest of it for getting people to convert to electric. So that's not happening there. Manufacturers there, GM, Dodge, Chrysler, they're all looking, even Ford, they are pulling back, they are openly pulling back on their plans for EVs. Ford has reduced the production of the F-150 Lightning. GM, which actually used to be one of the pioneers, one of the leaders in America, heading towards electric. First electric car I ever drove was a Chevy Bolt in the Middle East, and they were leading the pack when it came to that thing, and they have throttled back on it. And of course Dodge are pretty much reducing dramatically the production of the EV version of the new Charger, focusing now on the internal combustion engine version instead. In the UK things are a little bit different, because obviously here we got that grant which I talked about in another video, which the government allowed, which was quite a significant. If the manufacturer met certain criteria, there was a significant chunk of the price of that car, which was automatic. So you didn't have to apply for it. The government just automatically subsidized it. But not all manufacturers met that. But then what some manufacturers did was, in order to stay competitive, was they took it out of their own bottom line and they said we're going to reduce it anyway. So they have seen in the UK an 80% increase in customers in terms of electric cars. So it actually has had an impact here already. It's a bit early to tell, to be fair, because it was only recently introduced, but it does seem to have had an impact, and there does seem to be more of a take-up in electric vehicles already due to these grants that the UK government introduced. So what does it all mean for car buyers and for us, for car enthusiasts? Well, for buyers considering sports or performance cars, high-end stuff, certainly it's good news, because that means that the internal combustion engine is likely to continue to be offered and continue to be available, and therefore petrol is going to be around for a good while yet. So those people that think, well, 2030 are all the petrol stations going to disappear? No, I think we're looking at well into 2030s, possibly 2040. We will still have your petrol station around the corner. There may be a few less petrol stations around, let's be absolutely honest, because some petrol companies will simply downscale when they start to see less customers. That's inevitable. However, that doesn't mean that you can be you're stuck. As we've seen from the UAE is certainly not experiencing anything like that at the moment, but they've already introduced a service in Dubai where you can call up a number or use an app, I'm guessing, and a little petrol tanker will come to you and fill your car up. Wherever you are, it will come to you and it will fill your car up. So, and I can actually foresee services like that being implemented around the world at some point, if not this decade, then certainly next decade. I think we're going to be seeing some of those, especially if these internal combustion engine cars are going to be around. You're probably asking, well, what about the government's legislation, the 2030 cutoff? Well, the government is wishy-washy about these things anyway. It's already been changed once. So what's to say that they're not going to change it again, or that it's actually never going to happen? My personal feeling is that extreme cutoff is never really going to happen. There's always going to be percentage requirements. There's going to be some kind of incentivization. There's going to be some loopholes, but or there's going to be boutique manufacturers, high-end manufacturers, and maybe going to get some kind of an exemption. So I think that there's going to be some change there anyway. I think that's almost inevitable that will happen, because certainly the market just doesn't seem ready for it. Now, the thing to keep in mind though is that the internal combustion engine cars that will be available will be more expensive. This is what appears to be happening, is the manufacturers are going, okay, well, customers still want internal combustion engines. We're being told by the government to go EV. Well, we'll go EV, but we'll still offer these internal combustion engine vehicles, but at a premium. So if you really wanted them and you can afford them, you can still have them. So at some point, we're going to see the situation that we currently have, where EVs are more expensive than petrol, is going to end up like this. So EVs will become more accessible and affordable, especially as battery technology improves and gets better and better. But petrol internal combustion engine cars will become more expensive. So this is very likely to happen. I would say within the next few years, actually, we're going to probably see this not only price parity, but a reverse around the other way, where petrol cars are going to get more expensive. For emissions and policy, this pushback means the regulators will need to clarify targets, as we've discussed. National grids also will need to decarbonize, because Toyota's argument stands. It's like, well, if the electricity that you're getting to charge your car is not clean, then what's the point of us making electric vehicles if they're not actually clean, because you're still getting them from a pollutive source, if you like. So that's going to have to change. There's going to be more. In the UK, we actually have moved significantly to clean energy, and we continue to do so. So again, the environment here is a little bit different, a little bit more conducive to encouraging people to actually switch to electric, because it is better for the environment, and certainly for pollution in urban environments. And of course, cities are where EVs work best. So, you have to think about that as well. And I this is not a bad thing, because as I've always said, I'm neither pro EV nor anti EV. I'm pro the choice of the driver. Whatever you think suits your lifestyle and your situation and your needs should be available for you to buy. And those people that are buying electric vehicles should not be forced to buy electric vehicles. They should be buying electric vehicles because they work for them, because they make sense to them. Certainly right now, if somebody lives in a house in a very congested urban area, they have a drive and they can install a smart charger at home, then I would actually say to them, buy an EV, because you will save a significant chunk of money by just keeping that thing plugged in at home. And if you're not doing a lot of mileage, and most of your mileage is in traffic, you'll actually not use that much electricity, and you'll be actually fine. And you will find that you're going to save that massive petrol bill that you've been paying, or even diesel bill in some cases, that you've been paying up to now. But if you have a diesel bill, it's more likely that you tend to have a car where you do higher mileages, which is why you've got a diesel, in which case EVs won't necessarily be the best choice for you. The EV future is still coming, there's no doubt about it, but the roadmap there's more obstacles on it than probably was perceived by a lot of people. And things like these U-turns that we're seeing with Porsche and some of the other manufacturers, I think this is a sign of a reality check that is happening across the industry and across the globe, where people are sitting up and going, well, legislation and good intentions are one thing, but if we're not quite ready, if the tech is not quite ready, if the infrastructure is not quite ready, and then most importantly, if the consumer is not quite ready, then what the hell are we doing? We need to think about, if we are going to make this change, we need to make it a more gradual, a more natural, a more conducive change where people will embrace it rather than try to resist it, which in some situations is kind of what we're seeing at the moment. Anyway, that's what's happening. That's the quick EV update. Well, not so quick, I suppose, but that's the EV update on what is going on right now. It's a mixed bag of news. I want to hear what your opinion is. Have you made the switch to EV? Are you thinking of making that switch to EV? Or do you find that this kind of kickback from manufacturers is actually good news? Let me hear your opinions in the comments below, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Shout out time, guys. Thank you so much. Hey, if you enjoy my content, why not get involved? Buy me a coffee. You can do that at either of these links. Or if you're watching on YouTube, buy me a thanks or take out a membership. It all helps. It really does.